year, generally ranging between 12, 14 degrees Celsius. Some spots might even reach 15. We will hold on to that cloud as we move into the overnight period. Again, some bits of drizzle are possible generally across western locations. Meanwhile, that frontal feature will gradually push its way to the north across the Highlands before this second area begins to move in across Scotland in the early hours of Tuesday morning. Underneath that cloud, temperatures are not going to be falling too far at all. Some of us might actually hold up in double digits in places, just a bit cooler across the far north of Scotland where we've got a few more breaks in that cloud. Tuesday then looks to be another cloudy day for the vast majority. We've got that rain gradually shifting northwards across Scotland. This will be accompanied by a freshening breeze, particularly in the north and west. Winds staying lighter further to the south and east, but again, temperatures in that southwesterly airflow are going to be well above average for the time of year. Once again, 12, 13 degrees certainly possible. We could still see the likes of 14 degrees in places. As we move throughout the rest of the week, it will turn brighter for some of us, but we will also see those temperatures dropping off a bit more, closer to average for the time of year, but some chillier nights as well. Enjoy your day.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock on Monday the 20th of February. I'm Bev Turner. Today, the news that we were all dreading. A body found by walkers amongst the reeds of the River Wyre, 3 weeks after the disappearance of mother Nicola Bulley just a mile away. Of course, the police haven't officially identified the deceased yet, so stay with us this morning. We may hear from Lancashire police at any moment. They're under huge pressure, of course, to keep the family and the public, who feel very invested in this case, fully informed. We'll have all the latest. The biggest challenge of his premiership so far, that's how resolving the Northern Ireland Protocol is being described, as PM Rishi Sunak faces pushback from Eurosceptic backbenchers and the DUP. We were promised an oven-ready deal, a Brexit deal by Boris Johnson. So why are we still being held to ransom by the EU? Does Rishi have the resolution? And these days, it can feel that we aren't even allowed to use the word woman. So, rare good news for females today, thanks to Suella Braverman announcing new, harsher crackdowns on domestic abusers. Stay tuned to hear how the government plans to protect and help victims of violence at home. Very good morning. It's also being reported that Prince Harry's legal battle with the Home Office over police protection in Britain has already cost the taxpayer almost £300,000. Should Prince Harry have police protection? Let me know what you think on that and all the other stories this morning. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots ahead, but first, let's get you up to date with what's happening here and around the world with Tamsin.
Bev, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. The partner of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has spoken of the family's agony after a body was found yesterday in the river near to where she went missing. Lancashire police are working to provide a formal identification of the body, which was found in the water around a mile from where Nicola was last seen. They're currently treating the death as unexplained. The 45-year-old disappeared more than 3 weeks ago whilst walking her dog. Peter Folding, who led a private search of the river for Nicola, says he still doesn't believe she drowned.
If Nicola had fallen in the play at the bench where the phone was found, she would have landed in 2 feet of water. She would not have drowned at that location. I don't believe Nicola went in because the police divers searched that area thoroughly that afternoon and drowning victims go to the bottom. She could not have made it over the weir in a day. There's no way, and that my whole team and other police have looked at this. It baffled me.
More than 11,000 healthcare workers from the GMB and Unite unions in England and Wales are walking out today in their continuing dispute over pay and staffing. The workers striking include ambulance workers, paramedics and call handlers. GMB says it's over a month since the government engaged in meaningful dialogue. Elsewhere, the result of a ballot of around 45,000 junior doctors is expected to be announced later today by the British Medical Association. Number 10 has denied reports that the Prime Minister has been forced to delay an announcement over the Northern Ireland Protocol amid backlash from his own MPs. Talks between the government and the European Union are ongoing to try and break the impasse over the contentious post-Brexit trading deal. The DUP says it won't support an arrangement which means the European Court of Justice maintains oversight. It's understood Rishi Sunak held talks with his EU counterparts on giving local politicians a greater say on how EU laws are applied in the region. We'll just bring you a little bit of breaking news that we've had in the last few minutes. We're hearing that President Biden has made a surprise visit to Kyiv ahead of the first anniversary of the Russian invasion. He had been expected to visit Poland, but has just arrived in the Ukrainian capital. So that news just in, President Biden has made a surprise visit to Kyiv, and we'll, of course, bring you more on this as we get it this morning. Now, the average house price increased by £14 between January to February, according to property group Rightmove. It's the smallest increase they've recorded for that period since 2001. The report found many sellers are showing pricing restraint, which is abnormal for this time of year. It also blamed high mortgage rates, which are making buyers take longer to find a house. A record level of government support reached vulnerable households last month to help with energy bills, though many are still missing out. Homes across the UK were promised £400 in payments this winter. For the majority of customers, that money is automatically deducted from their bills. But those on prepayment meters must redeem a voucher. Take-up was initially slow, but January saw 1.7 million vouchers redeemed. But at least 25% have still not been claimed. Water companies will now be required to explain sewage spills into rivers and seas and provide plans to fix them. The Environment Secretary, Therese Coffey, is demanding that firms provide improvement plans for every storm outflow. The government is also looking at increasing the maximum fine from £250,000 to £250 million. Labour has criticised the plans, saying the measures would still allow for water companies to mark their own homework. North Korea has fired 2 more ballistic missiles from its east coast just 2 days after it launched an intercontinental ballistic missile into the sea off Japan's west coast. The sister of leader Kim Jong-un said her country's use of the Pacific Ocean as a firing range depended on the actions of the US military. South Korea has condemned the launches as a grave provocation, while Japan has called for an urgent UN Security Council meeting. Tributes have been paid to the former World of Sport presenter Dickie Davies, who's died at the age of 94. He presented ITV's World of Sport show from the 1960s right up until it ended in 1985. Gabby Logan has called him one of the best, while Sky Sports presenter Jeff Stelling called him an inspiration. German language movie All Quiet on the Western Front broke a BAFTAs record last night, winning 7 awards, the most ever by a foreign film. The World War I epic took home awards for Best Film and Best Director. Elvis star Austin Butler won the BAFTA for the Best Leading Actor, beating Colin Farrell, who'd been the favourite to take the prize for his role in The Banshees of Inisherin. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Welcome to the show. Now, would you believe that in the last year there were a huge 2.4 million people affected by domestic abuse? It can feel sometimes like women's rights are being eroded. So good news today. Home Secretary Suella Braverman is cracking down on a crime that largely affects women. Domestic abuse. We'll tell you about the new law changes shortly. It also affects men. I was surprised to read how many men are actually the victims of domestic abuse, but all that a little bit later. Now, Lancashire Police have confirmed that they recovered a body from the River Wyre just a mile away from where Nicola Bulley disappeared last month. The family of the mum of 2 have said that they are braced for the worst possible news. They are completely heartbroken. I think a lot of us feel like that this morning. The missing mother has not been seen since January the 27th, when, of course, she was last seen walking her dog along the river. So joining us now with the latest from Lancashire is our reporter, Sophie Reaper. Good morning, Sophie. This news broke yesterday. The news that all of us were dreading. Nobody wanted them to find a body. What do we know so far?
Good morning to you, Bev. Yes, after major police presence here in St Michael's on Wyre yesterday, we were given the news that a body has been recovered as part of the investigation to try and find the missing Nicola Bulley. Now, the body itself hasn't been officially identified as the missing mother of 2. We're still waiting to get official confirmation on that, and I'm sure at some point in the near future we'll be getting an update from Lancashire Police one way or another. Yesterday, in a statement, they said no formal identification has yet been carried out, so we're unable to say whether this is Nicola Bulley at this time. Procedures to identify the body are ongoing. We are currently treating the death as unexplained. So, of course, course, yes, we don't know yet whether it is Nicola Bulley, but her family were updated on the latest developments, and they have said they're bracing for the worst. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, we know that morning that Nicola dropped her children off at school, and then she proceeded with her dog Willow along this path here behind me, across the bridge and towards the upper field where the last confirmed sighting of her took place. Then about a mile downstream, that's where the body was recovered from yesterday after 2 walkers spotted it in the morning. Now, we are, of course, all, as you say there, no one wanted a body to be found, and we are all, especially Nicola's loved ones, we now face this agonising wait for an update from Lancashire Police. But as this day goes on, we'll be bringing you updates live here from St Michael's on Wire in Lancashire.
Thank you, Sophie. Sophie Reaper there at the Riverside in Lancashire, amongst the community who are, I imagine, bereft this morning. Well, joining me now is Peter Blexley, former Met detective. Good morning, Peter. I spoke to you last week and we had some questions, didn't we, about the police handling of this investigation. If this is Nicola, we do have to be a little bit cautious and a little bit sensitive to the fact there's been no official identification at this stage. What questions does it raise now, Peter, that she might have been there all along?
Well, on the at the press conference that was held last Wednesday by Detective Superintendent Rebecca Smith and Assistant Chief Constable Peter Lawson, Smith told us that leading experts in their field had been brought into the inquiry to assist and to help. And she further went on to tell us that the nationally recognised searching doctrine had been followed. Well, if this body does indeed turn out to be Nicola, then clearly those expertise might be called into question, as perhaps will the searching doctrine. Now, I understand that rivers, moving water are untamed things and can be very, very difficult. But nonetheless, there is going to be yet further questions, I'm sure.
Does it look now like a straightforward case of suicide to you, Peter, if this turns out to be Nicola? Or do we still have to keep an open mind about how she might have ended up in the river?
Oh, we're a very long way away from discovering exactly how this person died. There will, of course, need to be the identification, which I would expect to happen today. And then, very importantly, there will be a post-mortem. And it will be the pathologist's thorough examination that may go some way towards giving a cause of death. That, of course, will be tested sometime later in a coroner's court. But alongside all of that, there will still be the need for vitally important forensic work to be carried out, not only on the body, but perhaps on any clothing that the body may have been wearing. And we saw the crime scene investigators by the riverbank yesterday. I'm sure there will be further work needs to be done, and we may not get to establish the full truth for some time yet.
Well, are we likely to hear from Lancashire Police today, do you think, Peter? Because obviously they have had some reputational management issues, maybe we should put it like that, throughout the course of this investigation. Obviously, they released that extraordinary information last week about the fact that Nicola had struggled with her alcohol and with her menopausal symptoms. I do not know why that was remotely relevant at that stage. It felt like a step too far. Will they be feeling under pressure now to keep the public informed, as well as the family, who, of course, are the main priority?
Well, I'm not going to be as delicate or polite as you most professionally have been, because I am not going to sugarcoat it. Much of the messaging that Lancashire Police have put out has been utterly shambolic and appalling, and it's fuelled speculation when they've tried to tell us to stop speculating, and it's made a very difficult situation even more difficult for themselves. Certainly, there's been some very kind of 2023 phenomena in this case, in so much as that we've had TikTokers and the like actually digging holes and other people breaking into derelict properties, all with a view to getting likes, shares, retweets, comment, traffic on social media platforms, because some of these people make a living out of it. And I understand that that's quite a new phenomena, and I'm going to cut Lancashire some kind of slack in having to deal with that. We know they got a dispersal order, for example. But just to reiterate, the messaging has really not come up to scratch, and there needs to be an awful lot of long, hard staring in the mirror. But of course, we know that the police are not exactly famed for that, and nor are they famed for readily admitting excuses, admitting mistakes. They only tend to do that when they've been forced into a corner.
Peter, Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, gave this interview to an establishment mainstream media channel in which he didn't make any suggestion that there was anything wrong with her state of mind, which might have caused her to wish to take her own life. Looking back, that seems like quite a strange thing to have done. Do you think it was wise for him to give that interview at that stage? And if so, why was he doing that?
The police may or may not have had some influence over what Nicola's partner said. We know, of course, he gave that quite lengthy interview to a television documentary. Now, in a situation like this, it is most favourable if the police and the family are singing from the same song sheet, so to speak. But we know that has not been the case here. It may be that perhaps the family didn't entirely trust what Lancashire police were telling them, or perhaps agree with their media strategy. I'm sure that in the fullness of time we will find out, but it all cuts across one of the very big issues about this case, and that has been the speculation, the way that the media have been gripped by the story, as have the British public. For the last couple of weeks, the first conversation I have with anybody that I bump into the UK was always, what do you think happens to Nicola? It really has gripped the nation, and I suspect that later on today we might find out some significant news.
Absolutely. All right, Peter, thank you so much. Peter Blexley there. And of course, as we were discussing, Lancashire Police are under pressure to let people know what has happened. We will let you know as soon as we hear. It could be within the next couple of hours. Now, let me know what you think about everything we're discussing today. GBViews at gbnews.uk. The Northern Ireland Protocol deal. I know, don't switch off. I know it's a complicated and potentially quite a boring issue, but it's probably the biggest thing on Rishi Sunak's desk right now. He's set to reveal details of his plan today to fix this thorny issue. He's facing a rebellion of more than 100 MPs, while members of the DUP are pushing for further concessions from the EU. Let's go to Northern Ireland now to speak to our GB News reporter, Dougie Beattie, who is in Stormont. Dougie, just explain to us why what might appear to be quite a niche issue is actually incredibly important for everyone.
Well, it's all about consent, and it's all about goods shifting from Northern Ireland to the UK and vice versa. And of course, Northern Ireland is held inside that protocol deal. It was sounded out as a great deal for Northern Ireland, and of course it's not, because what it does do is keep us inside the laws of Europe. And the European courts look over those laws to make sure that we are not having an unfair advantage at any time. So it really aligns the economy in Northern Ireland with that of the Irish Republic, because it doesn't want us getting an upper hand in that economy. Northern Ireland's always had an upper hand because it's part of the 6th largest economy in the world, the UK. But this deal that is put through has tried to bounce the unionists back into government. And Rishi Sunak, we knew a deal was coming back from January. Keir Starmer actually, in Belfast, a visit here on the 13th of January, said, I will give you political cover if you need it. That's dangerous ground for the PM to stand on, to have to cross the floor to get a deal through when his own party behind him is looking and saying, we will rebel against you if you do not handle this the right way. And it really comes down to a bill that is currently in the House of Lords. It's stuck there at the moment, and it's basically saying unilaterally Britain can use its sovereign powers to do away with some other laws of the European courts and override them and allow Northern Ireland to come in together. What does it harm? It really harms things like state aid. In amongst that could be things like manufacturing, 25% on steel that comes in Northern Ireland, pharmaceuticals, and really here in Northern Ireland we are seeing the outworkings of that protocol on our shopping bills every week, and lack of goods in Northern Ireland, because most British firms don't want to go through the paperwork of bringing goods into Northern Ireland. So that's also costing British firms money coming in here. The same turnover is not there, and it's also costing manufacturers in Northern Ireland quite heavily as well. But more than anything, it's costing us place behind us, because the unionists here will not sit in power with nationalists, because of course, they have no democratic rights to change their own laws. So today, it will be interesting to see, will he announce a deal? I said last week, I don't think he would have. If a deal was coming, it wouldn't be this week, more than likely next.
OK, all right, thank you, Dougie. Well, when we do hear something, we will, of course, let you know. Now, do you remember 18 months ago, Prince Harry basically took his grandmother to court. He asked for a judicial review into whether he would be allowed to have royal police protection in this country, because it would mean he'd be protected by guns. I'll tell you how much it's cost the taxpayer already to have this very important, possibly, discussion. See you in a minute.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:22, this is Bev Turner Today on GB News. Still to come this morning, in a time where women's rights seem to be being constantly eroded. Good news today, Suella Braverman is cracking down on a crime that affects mostly women. Domestic abuse. We'll tell you about the Home Secretary's idea very soon. But first of all, my guests are here this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by NHS Dr. Raynaud Hoondekamp and broadcaster, lawyer and futurist Andrew Eborn. Right, let's start with this Prince Harry story. Before the break, I said to you I would tell you how much of your taxpayers' money has been spent on this judicial review that Prince Harry called for to ask that he might have armed protection, royal protection with guns. £300,000, Raynaud Hoondekamp. Are you OK with that?
Oh, firstly, I'm so tired of talking about Harry and Meghan.
But this isn't about Harry and Meghan. This is about our money this time. We spend a lot of time talking about their money and how much they have. This is our money.
I'm actually a bit torn on this. I really am, because I do think that he fought for our country in Afghanistan as a Prince of England, and he still is a member of the royal family, whatever you may think. And if he needs protection, as do all of the members of the royal family, then he should get it. I really do. However, I think if we don't offer this protection with guns to the other members of the royal family, then he shouldn't. I just don't think he can just whip out his chequebook and pay for it. That's the problem. But at the same time, we're running up such big costs defending it that would it just be cheaper to give it to him?
Well, that would mean common sense had prevailed, and we don't live in that sort of world, Renee. What are you talking about? I mean, look, this is the thing. He said, we'll pay for it.
He did.
I mean, frankly, they can afford it.
They can indeed.
You know, the
royalties from the book alone would help.
The book alone, absolutely. But of course, then the royals have said, well, you can't pay for it because that would mean any royal family could just arrive here and pay for it.
And this is the big problem I have with this story, is that it's all about the headlines and turning around. It's a Harry and Meghan story, and therefore we've got to approach it from a negative point of view.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is this is how much has been spent on the wonderful profession of lawyers fighting this case.
So all your fault.
I love it when it's my fault.
Every time on this show, everything is your fault.
I have the broadest shoulders ever. But what we like to do is to shine a spotlight on it. So the 300 grand is talking about the legal fees. There are two issues here. The first is, should they get protection? Personally, I believe they should. And they are going to get protection when they're doing their royal security for formal events. They're going to get that. The second is, when they're not doing those, because they're no longer royals, should they get that protection?
When they're doing the Netflix
which is now the Netflix thing. And then you turn around, does the Home Office have an obligation? So that's a legal question, which would be determined by the courts. But we're throwing so much mud around, we miss it. More light, less heat is what I always say.
Of course, there's the personal element of this, Renee, because this is effectively a father saying to his son, I won't pay for you to have the best protection when you are here. Like, there's that emotional... Imagine being the parent and having to make that decision.
I know. So I think Charles is in almost an impossible situation here, because on the one hand, he has to be the king, he has to be seen to be being frugal, which he's trying to do, but then he's his son, and I'm sure he's actually really torn. We all know. We've got children, we know what it's like. I mean, maybe they should just stay away.
Oh, do you think they should be there at the coronation?
Look, I think, of course, they should be there. They are members of the royal family. But I actually do think that these two are going to bring so much publicity with them. They're going to milk it so much. It should be about the king and his coronation, and it's going to be about Harry and Meghan. Part of me thinks they should
Well, what I really love, is that they've managed to work it out that it's going to be on Archie's 4th birthday, which is also on May the 6th. So in that glorious way, the king, they obviously had a conversation behind the scenes. Let's celebrate Archie's 4th birthday in style. Let's do the coronation at the same time. So that's probably what happened.
Oh, I did not know that.
There you go. We like to break news
and it's
here.
a good excuse, apparently. This is one of the reasons why Meghan may not come, which I find absolutely ridiculous as a mother of a 4-year-old. You're talking to the woman who went on honeymoon on her own because my husband had something else to go to. So, you know, missing a 4-year-old's birthday surely isn't very high on the list.
But she will use that then as the excuse.
She will.
I can't possibly go to the coronation because
birthday.
I've got a 4th birthday party to throw. Oh, come on. Yeah, as if. Right. Right, OK, let's go on to this next story. Now, this is any excuse to talk about the great Ron DeSantis in Florida, from me, as you know. Interesting health story, though, Renee, isn't it? That doctors in Florida are now being told to warn recipients of the COVID jabs that the shot could cause adverse effects, including heart attacks. Why has it taken so long?
Right, so why has it taken so long? So my big issue with the vaccine has always been not that we should cancel it and not do it. I think if it has value for vulnerable people, then it has value. But my big issue is that we were never consenting people in the way that we are trained as doctors to do. You know, we are told that we should give fully informed consent, even if some of that is bad. And if somebody then makes a decision not to have something, even if we think they're being foolish and they're competent, we should leave them alone and let them make it. We've done none of those things. So we knew very early doors, Bev, that this was causing myocarditis in younger men especially, very early doors. I was mocked on the BBC for saying this.
Well, it was in Pfizer's own trial, in their original trial.
Yeah, you know, and people said, oh, but it's so tiny, it's so tiny. And my point always was, yes, but does that 18-year-old actually need this vaccine, or do they need myocarditis? You know, it's time for us to actually be grown up, treat this medicine, this vaccine, as we should all medicines, and say to people, look, there is this risk of you getting this, there is this risk of you getting COVID and being seriously ill. The decision is now yours. We haven't done that, and that's been the problem. And actually, Florida looks like they're ahead of the game on doing that.
But doesn't it show that how politics became so entwined with medical advice, Andrew? Because this is Ron DeSantis, who's basically he's a Republican, but he's very much anti-establishment. He's a maverick politician. He likes to carve his own path, and he's taken the politics out of it and said, let's just tell people they can have it if they want to, don't have it if you don't want to. But these are the risks.
It has to, as you rightly said at the top, it has to be about informed consent. But we also have to make sure that we don't scare people. There's the whole thing about fear. It was the father of PR, Edward Bernays, who said if you want to sell anything, the easiest way is through fear. And so when you look at these sort of statistics, of course, like any medicine, you need to, and any vaccination, you need to turn around and say, look, these are the risks, and here are the percentages, and you've got figures here. In 2021, 41,473 vaccine-related injuries were reported in Florida. OK, well, those are the statistics. You work out how many people had the vaccine and what the positive effects were, and then you make an informed decision. So I'm all for informed consent. I'm not for scaremongering unnecessarily.
Well, I mean, we had a lot of scaremongering necessarily, ironically, you could say.
Well, exactly.
It went the other way, didn't it?
I mean, and we still have it. We still have, for example, you know, celebrities putting out videos saying that the unvaccinated should be locked at home. You know, this is carrying on, and this is abuse of our freedoms as people, our ability to make a decision about something. We were treated like babies, not even children.
Yeah.
You know, I can reason with my 4-year-old. We were treated like babies who could not absorb information and make a decision. And it's nice to see that there are areas in the world that are doing that, and there are other countries as well.
Yeah.
You know, the Nordic countries have been quite ahead of the game in saying, no, someone under 50 doesn't need this vaccine. For me, it comes back every single time to informed consent. And as a doctor, if you weren't happy to do that, you weren't upholding your oath.
And that's the frustration, isn't it? That informed consent underpins so much of medical ethics in this country. It is the cornerstone upon which it is all built. Whether you're going in to have a caesarean section or one of the procedures that you want robots to do, you have to give the patient, a pregnant woman isn't a patient, but you know what I mean, you have to give the recipient of those interventions a full list.
Absolutely. And this is the problem as well, though, is that in lockdown and even before that, with Brexit, everybody becomes an expert. And all of a sudden, they've got no medical training at all.
Apart from the experts.
Apart from the experts. And this is the crazy thing about it. So I always say, question everything, listen to the experts, and then you can make an informed decision.
And yet, if you'd asked your doctor about the risks of myocarditis, as they will now know in Florida, they wouldn't have done them anyway.
And if I had £1 for every time early on, Bev, you would have seen it, that I was told on Twitter that I was just a GP. What did I know? Well, you know what? Just GPs have exactly the same medical training as every other doctor.
And if you had £1 every time, you would be able to afford school fees for your 4-year-old.
Yeah, I was just a journalist and I knew this. So, you know, right, now, still to come, the Home Secretary, thanks, guys, is cracking down on domestic abuse, announcing new laws this morning. Is this a victory for women, and is enough being done to help victims? That's all after your morning's news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thank you. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 10:32. President Biden has made a surprise visit to Kyiv ahead of the first anniversary of Russia's invasion. Meeting with President Zelensky, he said the United States would stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. He's expected to announce the delivery of further military equipment, including ammunition and radar systems. Mr. Zelensky said the visit was an extremely important sign of support for all Ukrainians. It comes just days before the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. The partner of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has spoken of the family's agony after a body was found yesterday in the river near to where she went missing. Lancashire police are working to provide a formal identification of the body, which was found in the water around a mile from where Nicola was last seen 3 weeks ago. They're currently treating the death as unexplained. Peter Faulding, who led a private search of the river for Nicola, says he still does not believe she drowned.
If Nicola had fallen in the play at the bench where the phone was found, she would have landed in 2 feet of water. She would not have drowned at that location. I don't believe Nicola went in because the police divers searched that area thoroughly that afternoon, and drowning victims go to the bottom. She could not have made it over the weir in a day. There's no way, and that my whole team and other police have looked at this. It baffled me.
More than 11,000 healthcare workers from the GMB and Unite unions in England and Wales are walking out today in their continuing dispute over pay and staffing. The workers striking include ambulance workers, paramedics and call handlers. GMB says it's over a month since the government engaged in meaningful dialogue. German language movie All Quiet on the Western Front broke a BAFTAs record last night, winning 7 awards, the most ever by a foreign film. The World War I epic took home awards for Best Film and Best Director. Elvis star Austin Butler won the BAFTA for the Best Leading Actor, beating Colin Farrell, who'd been the favourite to take the prize for his role in The Banshees of Inisherin. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
Is so muddy.
Around 2.5 million people in Wales
out.
were victims of domestic abuse in the last year. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is clamping down on this crime, often secret crime, behind closed doors. She's got new laws this morning. We're going to find out what's being done to help people who are going through this in just a few minutes. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Good morning, it's 10:37. This is Bev Turner Today on GB News. You've been getting in touch about Harry and whether he should have his royal detail protection paid for. Julia said if Harry wants extra security other than that which normally would be provided in this country, he should pay for his own security. That's what he wants to do, unfortunately, but he's not allowed to. And Theresa said not only is he a disloyal royal, he's not a working royal and should not receive tax-paid police protection. He wanted to be just Harry, so he should just go away and do just that. Keep your views coming, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Now, domestic abuse, it's an issue which amazingly affected 2.4 million people in England and Wales last year. And the Home Office, particularly under the leadership of Suella Braverman, want to do something about it. So here to tell me all about it is GB News' political reporter, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning.
And what's Suella Braverman been saying? She's written an article about this, laying out her ambition. It's quite feisty stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, actually, for the first time, this is going to be viewed essentially as a national threat. Fundamentally domestic violence, but let's be honest about this. You talked about 2.4 million people being affected by this every year. Let's be honest, it is vast majority women.
Yeah, that's two-thirds,
Yeah.
Interestingly.
That's not to downplay the fact that domestic violence does happen to literally, it could be anyone, but it is primarily women who suffer most from this. And the government put in £8.5 million of investment into essentially extending the register scheme so that violent offenders are put on a register, a bit like the sex offenders register that we've had for many years in this country, but also that lots more of them are going to be electronically tagged. So effectively, the police force will know where they are. And Rishi Sunak saying today that this has to become a priority for the police follows, of course, a whole series of incidents of violence against women where women have been murdered or kidnapped, or where domestic violence is quite difficult to deal with. It's one of these things that takes people, particularly women, again, to come forward, quite brave to come forward and report this. And they're also going to extend the Annie scheme, which is this scheme that you can go into things like job centres now and pharmacies and use that code word of Annie to effectively report abuse in a kind of more subtle, more secretive way.
Yeah, so you could basically go and say to somebody, is Annie here, please?
Yes.
As though you're just asking for a member of the staff, and the person
that should be the trigger word then
know.
for the authorities to kind of take action to try and get that person kind of out of that situation so that they can talk to the police or the authorities about what's going on. I mean, I have to say, it's kind of quite interesting, this Rishi Sunak saying today, you know, this is a priority, it's about preventing crimes from happening in the first place and bringing the perpetrators to justice. What is really interesting is that actually this is universally welcomed.
Yeah.
That very rarely happens in politics. I mean, the opposition, Labour's main criticism is that this should have happened a while ago, but they welcome it. And also the chief executive of the charity Women's Aid says that this is welcome news, but wants to see kind of this register published much more regularly.
Yeah.
But on the whole, most charities seem to be saying, you know, fair dues to the government. This is what we've been asking for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I would have liked them to have considered domestic abuse victims actually when we were going for more and more and more lockdowns without particular scientific indications for doing so. Just to look at the numbers on this, Darren, which I found really interesting. Domestic abuse charges halved from 20,000 in 2015 to 2016 to only 40,000 in 2020 to 21. That's the effects of lockdowns right there.
Yeah, and it's also the effect, but it's part of a wider trend which, you know, people would say, I mean, there are more police officers than we've ever had in this country, but clearly maybe they're not focusing necessarily on the right type of crime. But it's part of a wider trend as well, where we've seen, strangely, you know, convictions for rape, for example, have fallen to an all-time low. Even people being charged with crimes have fallen to an all-time low. So there's clearly a big problem, not just with domestic violence, but across the board, where police are investigating crimes, but the number of people being charged, let alone convicted, continues to fall. And there's no obvious or easy answer to that, but it's clearly not a good place to be.
No.
Is it?
I think that's really interesting, actually. We should look into that at a later date. Why the burden of proof to get somebody to that stage is obviously not being accumulated, investigated, whatever it is. Abusers, this is what some of the detail of this particular bill from Suella Braverman. Abusers who've been sentenced to a year or more for controlling or coercive behaviour will be recorded, as you say, on the sex offenders register, on the violent and sex offender register. But also, one thing that I think is, and you go, OK, this is all very punitive, but let's not help these people. Help isn't the right word, but let's educate abusive men as to why they might be doing it, surely to stop them going into another relationship in the future. They'll have to attend behaviour programmes and tell officers if they move under the terms of the new domestic abuse protection.
And I think that's what the Prime Minister's trying to get at, is, you know, at the end of the day, we all know if you've offended once, you're far more likely to offend again.
Absolutely.
This is about preventative action. And where it has worked in the past, we know, in a kind of similar scheme, is that when people who've committed a crime meet the victims of the crime, you know, obviously the victim has to consent to it, but it has worked where it kind of humanises and personalises that crime to these criminals, so they're less likely to do it in future. So that's kind of, I think, the idea behind this as well, that you go on a behavioural course to understand, because ultimately, you know, there are a lot of people who have committed domestic violence abuses in the past, and they are more likely to do so in the future. So if you can stop it from happening again, good idea. But the big thing here, I think, is this kind of, you know, they're going to spend the money on monitoring people a lot more closely, because to date, many feel that, you know, people get accused of domestic violence.
Yeah.
They might be found guilty of it, but they disappear back into the system again.
The only naysayer that I have found of this is, like you say, it's unanimously been greeted. This is a spokesperson in the newspapers today from Women's Aid. The chief executive, Farah Nazir, has said that the measures need to go further. At a time when the police response to violence against women and girls is a public priority, it is positive to see the government step up. These measures need to create, however, systemic change needed to keep women safe, and fail to hold any agency to account.
Yeah, and I think that's part of a wider thing. You know, we know that there's certain police forces now in special measures about not properly investigating crimes in the past, and many feel that, again, like, domestic violence is a very, very serious crime, but it can also lead to even more serious crimes. And we've seen a lot of very famous cases, infamous cases, in the last kind of couple of months have been reported where women have been murdered effectively by their partners. And again, it's about trying to spot that early, to monitor these people and to ensure it doesn't happen again.
20% of all deaths in the UK related to domestic abuse. And what you just hope, thank you, Darren, but what you hope is that these measures empower predominantly women. 2 out of 3 victims are women. Empower women to think, OK, I will be taken seriously. This will be treated as seriously as a terrorism threat. So well done. It's well, brave men. Now, thanks, Darren. February is Raynaud's Awareness Month, bringing attention to a condition that affects as many as 1 in 6. Raynaud's is a lack of blood flow in the body and is especially prevalent in these colder months. Our London reporter Lisa Hartle went to find out more.
These photos show the effects of Raynaud's. Fingers that have turned yellow or white as blood flow is restricted during an attack. Not many people have heard of the condition, yet it affects over 10 million people in the UK. It affects blood flow to parts of the body, most commonly hands and feet. These painful attacks are brought on by stress or cold temperatures. Jodie's had Raynaud since she was a teenager. She was at a football match when her fingers changed colour. After doing some research, she went to her GP.
They didn't really know anything about it, and she suggested that I put hot potatoes in my pockets, which wasn't really very helpful. It happens quite a lot in supermarkets. You know, if you go down the cold fridge or freezer aisles, that's when it is quite bad. And it's good now that there are different types of bags. When it was the thin plastic bags, it was just useless because your fingers go completely white. It can be one, it can be the end of one, or it can be all. But they go completely numb, so you can't feel anything, and it's just really difficult to kind of pick things up or do anything really when you're having an attack. It can take a couple of minutes for the feeling to come back, or it can take, an hour for the feeling to come back.
Though rare, the condition can be a sign of a more serious illness called scleroderma.
It is a rare autoimmune condition. It affects 19,000 people, so we don't want to raise alarm bells, but if you're having Raynaud's symptoms, but also having sore or swollen fingers or experiencing acid reflux, it could be an indication of this condition, so we would recommend going to your GP and talking to them.
People with severe Raynaud's can take medication. For those with a milder form, it's about keeping warm.
I was really worried about the energy prices increasing, because if I don't stay warm, then I get more of these attacks, and it can cause so many problems. Even just kind of, if you're working from home, even just typing, you can't feel your fingers. You can't really work like that.
We surveyed our community to ask them about the rising energy costs and how that's affecting their health, and it was quite shocking that we had results of over 76% of people were avoiding putting their heating on, which would then cause them a painful Raynaud's attack rather than pay the energy cost bills. So we are asking, we have written an open letter to the Chancellor to ask for some help for people with Raynaud's, particularly severe Raynaud's.
The charity hopes raising awareness will encourage people with the symptoms to seek a diagnosis from their GP. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Now, still to come this morning, Liam Halligan will be here with loads of financial stories. There's some fantastic stuff knocking around today that we need to understand. Government energy support packages continue to be rolled out to the most vulnerable households. Is that going to be enough? Stick around and see how it could impact you. But first, my guests are back with me this morning. NHS doctor Raynaud Hoenderkamp and broadcaster, lawyer and futurist Andrew Ebor.
I love the rolling R on that one as well.
Raynaud Hoenderkamp. Right, we are looking at this story about the fact that one of my biggest issues in life is litter.
Yes.
I know that sounds a bit sad to suggest it's one of my biggest
I agree with you.
I am that person who will see someone drop a packet of crisps and I will go and pick up the packet and give it back.
Me
and politely
too.
say, I think you've dropped something, and they're normally so embarrassed that they have to, yes, and put it in their pocket. So motorways, I don't know whether you've noticed, but our motorways at the moment and roads, it's like people are just emptying the litter out of
They
the car.
do.
What's happened to our sense of national pride?
Well, I agree with you, and I said this to Andrew, I'm that person too who goes, up and gives people back their litter and say, I think you dropped this. Because I was brought up by my mother that you never drop litter in the street. I mean, we weren't supposed to eat in the street ever either. She was really, really strict. And, you know, she taught me to have pride. So for me, this comes back to parenting.
Yeah.
And it does. You know, if we're not teaching our children, if children in that car are watching mummy and daddy chuck their rubbish out of the window, that's what they will do when they grow up. You know, there's no respect for what's around us and believing that it's ours, that we've paid for it, we're paying for it with our taxes, we should look after it.
But do you know what I also worry about, Andrew, is this idea that the state literally, metaphorically sweeps up after us. Something has happened to the national psyche to think it's always the problem of the government. You can get rid of my mattress on the wall.
And you're absolutely right, and that's the problem with this story. You can always see the story from different perspectives. What this story is actually saying is the national highways are not doing their obligation. It does not excuse the national highways' shameful and scandalous track record of inaction and dereliction of duty, which is exactly your point. Two aspects of this is, one, people should not be throwing out the litter, and good old Jeremy Paxman, we love him, he was saying, we used to be, well, he came out today on Litter Brought Him Out.
Broadcasting has moved on since the days of Jeremy Paxman, no one's heard of him.
Exactly. Well, he now is a commentator on these matters. He said, we used to be a nation of shopkeepers, we aren't anymore, we're a nation of litter louts.
I agree.
So two sides of that, we are litter louts and we should stop it. The second, though, is the obligation to clear up. And what this story is focused on is the obligation, so Mike Pickering was saying that, Penning rather, was saying we need a cultural change to deal with this.
But we do, because if the litter wasn't there in the first place, we wouldn't be criticising the Highways Agency. And once again, you know, it takes money for the Highways Agency to pick things up. In terms of dumping mattresses and things, Bev, I think we've been really short-sighted as a
that was really random. If you were listening on the radio and said, why did Beverly talk about a mattress
I know
against
why
the
you
wall?
did.
That's because we were showing footage of the fly tipping situation.
Right. Fly tipping is really another scourge of our communities
now.
Absolutely. But I actually think local councils have themselves to blame for that.
I
because
agree.
We all used to be able to pitch up at our local tip and take our rubbish there, and we all did it. Now, a lot of people have to pay to take their rubbish there, and the moment you put money on that, they dump it on the streets. And I don't think anyone's doing the sums of does it cost more to make people dump their rubbish on the streets or let them actually bring it to our tip? And now, since COVID, you had to book a slot at your tip, and many, many boroughs still keep that. So we've created that problem, the fly tipping one, but we need parents to take responsibility for their kids and educate.
You're absolutely, and I think the more we can get people, I'm sure the great British public watching this programme would say, absolutely, we should get pride in our appearance, not just of ourselves, but also in our streets and so on and so forth. And we also they need to look at it, what is the solution? Because if you suddenly put a skip outside, overnight, it suddenly gets all filled up, even if you're paying for it. We need to look at that in a sensible way. Don't just blame somebody else and expect them to clear up your own mess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, and also more dustbins, please. More dustbins on the street, more dustbins in parks, and actually empty the dustbins. By the time get to a Sunday afternoon in some touristy areas, it's just a massive pile of rubbish because nobody's emptied the bins and it's all blowing down the street. Who knew litter could be so interesting? Right.
Load of rubbish.
Oh, very good. OK, right. NHS woke guidelines. This is... I'm sure you're all in favour of these, Renee. When somebody comes into your surgery, do you automatically assume you understand their gender? Because if so, that's not how you meant to do it in 2023, you know.
Apparently not, but I'm a dinosaur. Let's remember that. I'm a dinosaur. This was designed, this story, to make my blood boil. So we have seen this week that we are erasing language in our children's best books, and this is the same thing. We are trying to erase biological sex. We are trying to say there's no difference between men and women, that there's 100 different variations in between, and in order to do that, they are attacking doctors now and trying to teach them how to suck eggs. I'm not being funny, Bev, but if you walk behind somebody, it doesn't matter what they're wearing, what their hair's like, whether it's long or short, you know if it's a man or a woman.
When you walk behind them.
When you walk behind them, by the way that they walk. Men and women are different. When we're buried and they dig us up in 300 years' time, they will know that you and I were women and Andrew was a man just from our skeleton.
Just check. You are, aren't you?
It depends.
We can't assume.
I could be anything. I could play devil's advocate. I could do... but you're right. It's an assumption, I think. But it also boils down to, which nobody would disagree with, it boils down to respect. And there's a balance between... There are some legitimate arguments that you want to talk about respect and so on and so forth.
course.
This is a 16-page document which was done by a Dr. Michael Brady, who I don't know. Do you know Dr. Anyway, he's a national advisor for the LGBT health at NHS England. I'm not quite sure what you'd say in that 16-page, other than respect is a good start. What they then turn around and say, when you're asking, they give you the NHS woke guidelines, apparently.
I don't think they call them that. That's what they call them.
Well, apparently this came from, was it the Mail? I think they said this.
They're not, but the NHS isn't actually embracing the word woke.
So they sort of turn around and say, you should ask open questions without making an assumption about somebody's identity. And if you've got a patient in front of you and it means a lot to them about their pronouns and so on and so forth, asking an open question, because you don't make assumptions, you don't say, are you Miss, Mrs.
Of course not.
You don't do that. You want to try and treat the patient. So trying to play devil's advocate. They're also saying, which I find extraordinary, facial expressions. There are some GPs, they say in this report, who will back away. And I don't know the evidence for this, but I would always question everything. If that's the case, that's not respect, which is why I started this whole thing about it. It's down to respect.
But I don't believe that happens. I'm sorry.
That's why I'm asking.
I don't believe that a doctor, when told that somebody is a trans patient and wants to be called whatever, backs away. I think that's nonsense. We've all been trained in the same way. We all see patients every day. We know how to handle them. Obviously, some people will be better than others, but I think that's just nonsense. But what worries me about this is it's actually dangerous in the end. So if we extrapolate this to where they want it to be, and we only call people with cervixes for a smear and people with prostates for their prostate check or whatever it is, it's dangerous because 50% of women do not even know what their cervix is. They don't know they have a cervix. They do, however, know they are a woman. So we are condemning people to miss important cancer screening. Yes. You know, of course I have patients who are trans and I will call them whatever they want to be and respect them totally as I would any other patient. And I do have patients. And that is not a problem at all. But this complete, dictating to doctors how they treat people, we have now got to a situation in hospitals, and this is not a joke I'm about to tell you, where we have 60-year-old men with beards being asked if they could be pregnant.
Wow.
And it's the tyranny of the minority, is it not? At the cost of the majority. That's what worries me.
Yeah, you're right, but boil down to respect and get rid of the craziness, but also stick to the facts.
Just be polite.
Stick to the facts.
And just be polite.
And be kind.
Do you know what I want from my doctors when I walk in? I want them to tell me their name. Most importantly, hello, I'm Dr. Raynaud. That's it. And then that's the start of a conversation. Right, we've got to the end of our first hour. In the next few moments, we're going to bring you the latest on the body that was found by Lancashire Police in the River Wyre. Specialist teams are working to identify the deceased. We could get the results any moment now. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Gusty winds across much of the north today. They'll be steadily easing through the day. Bit of rain across Scotland, but most places dry and, for most of us, pretty mild. We've got low to the north, a high to the south, and in between this weather front, that's where we're seeing the thickest cloud and a little bit of rain. But the isobars fairly tightly packed as well. It is quite gusty, particularly over northeast England and northern Scotland. Staying fairly damp through the central belts, bit of drizzle over the Cumbrian Fells and over Snowdonia, but most places dry, and actually some decent spells of sunshine over parts of the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And it is mild, so temperatures into the teens. 14, 15 Celsius where we see some sunshine. Cooler further north, but even here temperatures are a touch above average for the time of year, but feeling a bit colder with the winds. Those winds will continue to ease through this evening. The rain should clear away from the central belt, but fairly damp nights across parts of western Scotland. Otherwise, again, most places dry. Could be some mist and fog. We'll generally just keep a lot of cloud. And look at these temperatures overnight, staying at 7 or 8 Celsius, so a very mild start to Tuesday. Tuesday, again, mild, dry and cloudy for the majority. It won't be as windy as today across the north. We will see some rain clearing away initially from northern Scotland, but then pushing back into the Western Isles later. Elsewhere, again, bar a bit of drizzle over coast and hills, most places dry, but a cloudier day for the Midlands and East Anglia. And perhaps not quite as mild, but still temperatures double digits almost across the board. We might get up into the teens in 1 or 2 places. North East Scotland may well see some breaks in the cloud and some sunny spells. But in the west, signs of a change through Tuesday evening. A weather front, this line of rain is a weather front moving in, and it's a cold front as well. So it will be introducing colder air. Some showery rain on Wednesday, but still a lot of dry weather and just turning a little chillier. Goodbye.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 20th of February 2023. I'm Bev Turner. Today, Lancashire police have confirmed they have recovered a body from the River Wire just a mile away from where 45-year-old mother of two, Nicola Bulley, disappeared only 3 weeks ago. The family of Nicola Bulley say they are braced for the worst possible news. Meanwhile, Lancashire police are working to identify the body. Of course, the police haven't officially identified the deceased yet. We will keep you updated on this morning when we hear from Lancashire police. It could be at any moment. They're under huge pressure, of course, to keep the family and also the public invested in this case, and we will bring it to you when we know. The average house prices have increased by only, brace yourselves, 14 quid from January to February, making it the smallest increase in a month since 2001. Is this a sign of a more promising fall in the future? If you're a first-time buyer, then it might just be good news for you. I'm going to be talking to Liam Halligan about that and lots of other financial stories this morning which will affect you. And experts warn that a brutal start of the year could continue in the retail industry. This is one of those stories, as almost 15,000 jobs have been slashed since the start of this year. Why are there so many job cuts, and what's the government going to do to help? Find out on Bev Turner Today. Good morning. We're going to be discussing the reports also that King Charles may force his brother Andrew out of his £30 million Windsor home. Ooh, do you agree with that? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots ahead this morning, but first let's get you up to date with what is happening here and around the world with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 11. President Biden has made a surprise visit to Kyiv ahead of the first anniversary of Russia's invasion. Meeting with President Zelensky, he said the United States would stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. He's expected to announce the delivery of further military equipment, including ammunition and radar systems. Mr. Zelensky said the visit was an extremely important sign of support for all Ukrainians. It comes just days before the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. The partner of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has spoken of the family's agony after a body was found yesterday in the river near to where she went missing. Lancashire police are working to provide a formal identification of the body, which was found in the water around a mile from where Nicola was last seen. They're currently treating the death as unexplained. The 45-year-old disappeared more than 3 weeks ago whilst walking her dog. Peter Folding, who led a private search of the river for Nicola, says he still doesn't believe she drowned.
If Nicola had fallen in the play at the bench where the phone was found, she would have landed in 2 feet of water. She would not have drowned at that location. I don't believe Nicola went in because the police divers searched that area thoroughly that afternoon and drowning victims go to the bottom. She could not have made it over the weir in a day. There's no way, and that my whole team and other police have looked at this. It baffled me.
More than 11,000 healthcare workers from the GMB and Unite unions in England and Wales are walking out today in their continuing dispute over pay and staffing. The workers striking include ambulance workers, paramedics and call handlers. GMB says it's over a month since the government engaged in meaningful dialogue. Elsewhere, the result of a ballot of around 45,000 junior doctors is expected to be announced later today by the British Medical Association. Number 10 has denied reports that the Prime Minister has been forced to delay an announcement over the Northern Ireland Protocol amid backlash from his own MPs. Talks between the government and the European Union are ongoing to try and break the impasse over the contentious post-Brexit trading deal. The DUP says it won't support an arrangement, which means the European Court of Justice maintains oversight. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says there's a real window of opportunity to move forward.
The UK and the EU have obviously edged closer together. The question now is whether the Prime Minister is strong enough to get it through his own backbenchers. And what I've said is, on Northern Ireland, the national interest comes first. So we will put party politics to one side. We will vote with the government if there's a deal to vote for. And so the Prime Minister doesn't have to rely on his backbenchers. We in the Labour Party are putting country first and party second.
Former SNP Westminster leader Angus Robertson has announced he will not be running for party leadership. Scotland's External Affairs and Culture Secretary had been tipped as one of the frontrunners to replace Nicola Sturgeon after she resigned last week. Mr Robertson said it's a privilege and honour that people want him to stand, but as a father to 2 young children, it isn't the right time for such a commitment. The average house price increased by £14 between January to February, according to property group Rightmove. It's the smallest increase they've recorded for that period since 2001. The report found many sellers are showing pricing restraint, which it says is abnormal for this time of year. It also blamed high mortgage rates, which are making buyers take longer to find a house. North Korea has fired 2 more ballistic missiles from its east coast just 2 days after it launched an intercontinental ballistic missile into the sea off Japan's west coast. The sister of leader Kim Jong-un said her country's use of the Pacific Ocean as a firing range depended on the actions of the US military. South Korea has condemned the launches as a grave provocation, while Japan has called for an urgent UN Security Council meeting. German language movie All Quiet on the Western Front broke a BAFTAs record last night, winning 7 awards, the most ever by a foreign film. The World War I epic took home awards for Best Film and Best Director. Elvis star Austin Butler won the BAFTA for the Best Leading Actor, beating Colin Farrell, who'd been the favourite to take the prize for his role in The Banshees of Inisherin. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
So a record level of government energy bill support reached vulnerable houses last month, although many are still missing out. Liam Halligan will be here to tell you how you could get a discount on your energy bill. That's by 11:15. Lancashire police say they have sadly recovered a body from the River Wyre just a mile away from where Nicola Bulley disappeared last month. A statement says that formal identification has not yet been carried out. They're unable to say if it was her at the time of that statement. The family of the 45-year-old mum of 2 have said that they are braced for the worst possible news and are incredibly heartbroken. Earlier on GB News, Eamon and Isabel spoke to search and rescue specialist Peter Folding about how the specialist team could have missed finding the recently located unidentified body.
have searched that area with sonar and divers for the last 3 weeks. We spent 4 hours searching for Nicola at that strip of the river. I categorically confirm that Nicola was not on the riverbed. We would have seen her. Her body, if it is Nicola, and I hope it's not, or whoever, the body was found in the reeds, not on the riverbed. And I cleared with the media that as sonar does not search in the reeds, they all know that, and the police know that. There was no sign of Nicola laying on the bottom.
Unequivocally said to us that if she was in the river, you would find her. And you also offered theories about how there was a weir and you didn't believe that her body could go past it. And yet here we are. Her body had gone past the weir. Her body, a body, we believe, has been found in the river. Do you not accept there are any errors or perhaps lessons to be learned for you in this?
Not at all. I mean, we recover on average 10 drowning victims a year and a number of suicides, and we got a very high hit rate. If Nicola had fallen in the play at the bench where the phone was found, she would have landed in 2 feet of water. She would not have drowned at that location. I don't believe Nicola went in because the police divers searched that area thoroughly that afternoon, and drowning victims go to the bottom. She could not have made it over the weir in a day. There's no way, and that my whole team and other police have looked at this. It baffled me, and I'm the one on here today defending my good work to try and help all the families that we do free of charge. There's no other voice out there, and the media have come to me for an update. And I want to say again, the police have searched that area along the banks for 3 weeks thoroughly with divers using side scan sonar and us. And, you know, there's always a fall guy, and it looks like it's trying to be me, but I'm not accepting it. We've got the sonar imagery of the riverbed, which I can prove. We have everything there, and we done the best with our ability, but it was not our remit to search the reeds at all. That was the land search teams.
Peter, it's actually just sad that you're having to defend yourself. The police have to defend themselves when... Yeah. The really only important thing is this woman, what happened to her, and if this is her at the end of the day.
Thank you, Eamon. I mean, my thoughts go out to the family. I remained in close contact with the family. The trolls out there, and you know, we need to get a grip of these people. These are just the vile comments against the family, the police, myself. It's no one's fault. It's a very hard job dealing with drownings and missing people. It's not easy. And it's all the crime scene investigators who have to deal with this. We have to take our hats off to everyone who actually got involved with this search. And it's the trolls who need to be exposed, I'm afraid.
Peter, what have we learned? At the end of the day, what do you take away from all of this in terms of police resources, in terms of the way these searches are undertaken, in terms of lessons for the future?
I think, Eamon, the comms piece was the lesson here. The police comms piece was the big one, saying that, you know, that just detracting from everything. I think we need to learn the police are under-resourced. There are no police underwater search units hardly in the UK now. We cover the whole of the southeast for all the police forces. They got disbanded. Sussex got disbanded. Thames Valley went. The next one is Nottingham. And there needs to be investment to get resources back in place to assist in these inquiries.
Specialist diver Peter Faulding talking to Eamon and Isabel this morning and defending his part in the search for Nicola. Well, joining me now is the editor of Lancashire Post, Nicola Adam. Good morning, Nicola. Thank you very much for joining me. What did you make of Peter Faulding's assessment there? That she couldn't possibly, if this is the body of Nicola, and we're expecting to find out any minute really from the Lancashire Police, but if this is the body of Nicola Bulley, that he's saying it's impossible that she could have fallen in at the bench and made it that far down the river. For those of us who aren't familiar with that area, why would he say that, Nicola?
It's, you know, I'm not an expert on these things, you know, so I can't say exactly, but obviously they thought that she'd fallen in close to where the bench and where she'd left the phone and where the dog was running loose, which is... There's bits of deep water, there's bits of shallow water, but it's not the tidal part of the river, so it doesn't move quite as quickly. So I think that it would have been obvious if she'd kind of gone across the weir area. It's very shallow just there. She would have had to actually go across the weir. So I think it was thought unlikely that that's happened without her being seen. The stretch beyond that, which is it's about a mile before the spot where the body was found yesterday, that is tidal. It moves a little more quickly. It's very wide and very deep in places, and there's a lot of vegetation and reeds and things that a body potentially could get caught in. So, you know, you would have thought it would have been spotted, but it is quite a long stretch of river there. So, without being an expert on these things, I'm not sure why they didn't find the body. But obviously, she's just been carried by the river down there. If it is Nicola.
Yeah, huge impact on the local area there, Nicola. This particular sort of village town, well, not even a town really, is it? Where the Bulley family and Paul Ansell, her partner, and the little girls, who I think are 6 and 9, 7 and 9. What's the impact been there locally for you? What are you hearing from people?
It's been interesting because I think, like in St Michael's itself, the kind of take on it is slightly different than has been the wider take, particularly with regards to the police. Generally, I found people in St Michael's have been, super supportive of the police, and they say they've been, the police operation investigation's been really thorough and really quite intense, and they can see that they've been working really hard, so that they're generally quite supportive of the police and not that impressed by the kind of kickback the police have got on the investigation itself. I think, Peter Folding mentioned there probably the comms issues are where potentially the police have fallen down. But certainly in the village itself, it's been such a difficult 3 weeks. It is very small, you're right. It's under 700 people live in St Michael's. And, they have all found themselves in the spotlight, it's not something they're used to in St Michael's. It's not somewhere news, that falls on our news radar very frequently. And it's been very difficult. I just being in that public glare, a lot of them have felt accused of things. They felt like they're being, they've been thought they were culpable in something, and they've been, asked to be interviews or, TikTokers on every corner, and just the volume of people that have, a combination of police, of press, of, sort of more sort of Gawkerish people, and, just people searching. A lot of these people have, the best intentions. It's not all, just people, evilly trying to do something. Most people are trying to help. But it has been a lot for the people of St Michael's.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, thank you, Nicola, for joining us. Nicola Adam there, editor of the Lancashire Post. And as I say, when we hear anything from Lancashire Police, we will bring you that as soon as we possibly can in terms of the identification of this body that was found yesterday in the reeds on the River Wyre by a couple who were out walking their dog. So there's a brewing Tory tax row ahead of the March the 15th budget, with the Prime Minister facing pressure from his own backbenchers to avoid raising corporation tax. And Liam Halligan, this is partly your fault.
My fault.
You play a role in this story.
Well, you write newspaper columns and MPs read them and they turn them into letters.
But tell us what happened.
So this goes back to last spring when Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor before the Chancellor before the Chancellor.
Yeah.
And he passed a law in March 2022 that in April 2023, corporation tax, which is the main tax on business profits, big and small businesses, would go up from 19 to 25%. That was then reversed by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, remember them?
Yeah.
And then when they were ousted, it was then reversed. So the increase in March 2023 from 19 to 25% was reinstated by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. Now, I've been writing columns about this, saying that, in my view, if you raise corporation tax now at a time when lots of businesses are suffering, energy bills are going through the roof for firms, a lot of firms in April, Bev, will lose any government support they have with their energy bills. We spent billions during furlough keeping various companies alive. And so I've questioned the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility's assumptions that raising the corporation tax rate would actually make money. They reckon it would make £18 billion a year by 2027. I don't reckon that's true, because I think it will kill a lot of businesses. I think raising corporation tax by this much will actually cost the Treasury money, because it will kill off more businesses than money it will raise from existing businesses that survive. And I've been writing this in my Telegraph column for the last 3 or 4 weeks, really going at it and finding numbers and Remember, last week we showed a film. I went to Sutton Coldfield. There was a guy there running Clevedon Fasteners, an incredible little manufacturing company.
Making rivets and...
This is a company set up to make the rivets that originally held Spitfires together.
Remember.
Right? Unbelievable company. And he's literally spitting tax, as we say, about this corporation tax rise. And since then, AstraZeneca, the pharmaceuticals giant, said publicly, we were going to put this big new factory in the UK. Actually, now we're going to put it in the Republic of Ireland because they've got a 12.5% rate of corporation tax and you're raising your rate of corporation tax
So
to
your
25%.
article became a letter which got put on the desk of who?
Well, so what happened then is I've been writing about this in The Telegraph. Some other journalists have been piling in. A group called the Centre for Brexit Policy, who are very well connected with the Tory party, they wrote a letter and they asked various industrialists to sign it, economists to sign it, backbenchers to sign it. They asked me to sign it, but I refused because I thought that'd be wrong from a sort of Ofcom regulatory point of view, and we're obviously an Ofcom regulated channel. I can only put forward a point of view. I can't be seen to be actively campaigning.
Sure.
But a lot of industrialists signed this letter, but also a lot of Conservative backbenchers signed this letter, backbenchers who are leaders of particular groups. So there was the leader of the European Research Group, Marc Francois. There was the leader of the Conservative Growth Group, Simon Clarke, the former Levelling Up Secretary. There was the leader of what we call the No Turning Back Group, John Redwood, very well-known, very erudite Tory MP. And if you add up all the members of all of these groups and you don't double count, you're looking at about 50 or 60 Tory MPs. So that would wipe out Rishi Sunak's majority. If these Tory MPs say, look, we really think it's mad to raise corporation tax in this March budget, what they want on March 15th is for Hunt to stand up, given that when he campaigned to be Tory leader, he wanted a 15% rate of corporation tax.
Yeah, what happened?
And he say they want Hunt to say, look, the economy's, you know, there's a bit of a recovery coming. Interest rates are now probably peaked. Inflation's coming down. We actually think it would be wrong when we're trying to get the economy moving to raise corporation tax. That's what these backbenchers want. That's what lots of industrialists want. And it's not just big businesses. A lot of small businesses pay corporation tax too. And this can take 6% off their margin.
Quickly, energy bill support. What's happening for people out there who are worried about
in April, it's still up in the air. In April, we're expecting the energy price cap, which is the government subsidy for the average household energy bill. We're expecting it to go up, up from $2,500 to $3,000 a year, even though wholesale prices have been coming down. And the government's going to have to sort this out, because if energy bills go up in April, when people like me are going on about the reality that wholesale electricity and gas prices are coming down, there will be a serious political backlash. As for companies, right, almost all companies in April will lose all their energy support. Again, this is something I've been highlighting here on GB News. Remember, I went to that pub in Kent a few weeks ago, and the guy there, his energy bill went from 20 grand to 80 grand, and now it's going to go up again. Only like steel makers and very, very energy intensive manufacturers are getting any help, and a few public sector bodies.
It just feels, it almost feels deliberately, and they've got to do something, they've got to help businesses. I think the corporation tax is the obvious one. If you want to support business, they can probably, that's going to save...
The key message for us, Bev, is small companies pay corporation tax too. This is not just about the big city high rollers. It's about small companies. They need a leg up if we're going to get this economy moving.
Yeah, but you know what? The small companies won't be able to handle it. The big companies can probably ride it out. That's my concern.
They can move money between jurisdictions. They can do more investment. They can use the offsets. It's the small companies. They desperately need that margin, because that's what they use to reinvest to grow the economy and create jobs.
Absolutely. Well, talking about... thanks, Liam, as always. Talking of people who've got lots of money and probably might have to spend a bit more in the forthcoming future, it's Prince Andrew. Should he get to keep his £30 million home, seeing as he's got no royal duties? I'm going to be debating that with my panellists in just a few minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes, already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Good morning, it's 11:25. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thanks for watching us. Still to come this morning, UK retailers have slashed almost 15,000 jobs since the start of 2023. Are we being slowly replaced? Could you lose your job to a robot? Stick around, we'll be discussing this later on. But first, my guests are still here with me, my panel. I'm delighted this morning. NHS doctor Raynaud Hoondekamp and a broadcaster, lawyer and futurist Andrew Eborn. So, should Prince Andrew keep his £30 million mansion? Discuss, Andrew Eborn.
Well, I think it's very interesting because he's now inherited a lot of money, Prince Andrew.
Of course.
And I know it's probably the tiniest violin ever that you can find with people standing around with a bit of sympathy. So he's always denied the allegations, even though he paid reputedly £12 million to somebody he may never have met. And there's all sorts of evidence being offered that it might have been a fake photo in this era. Well, you can have fake photos, and we've spoken about that on this very show. But now what's happening, he's worried that King Charles will stop him having his allowance of £249,000, and as a result...
A year? So he has £250,000 a year just for his wages?
Just for being... because he's no longer royal duties, but this is what the Queen used to give him. But to stay in a £30 million house costs a lot of money, because you've got to do lots of repairs and so on and so forth. So, as I say, it's a sob story, which I think, when people are talking about heating or eating, is not going to get the great British public behind them.
It really isn't, but I think it plays into the arrogance of the Duke of York. Yeah. I really do. I mean, from what I've read about him, he's he's got a very inflated opinion of his own self-worth and his intelligence, apparently neither of which are as good as he thinks they are. And this is the fact that he feels able, as you rightly say, Andrew, in this time when people really are struggling to heat their homes, to moan that he might not be able to stay in his £30 million house is just evidence of that. He's just arrogant. He's away with the fairies. He's out of touch with people. And frankly, as you've said, he inherited a lot from his father when he died, from his mother when he died. I don't believe for a second that he can't afford to pay for his house. He just doesn't want to.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And in fact, you've all been getting in touch. We were talking about Harry earlier. And a lot of you are saying that actually he has walked away from his royal duties. This is the one that I like. Dee said, even Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, who carries out endless events a year, only ever gets protection at official events. Harry and Meghan would have been the same. The trouble is, Princess Anne is so wonderful.
Oh, she is. And she's brilliant.
So wonderful that any royal that comes out and says something like this, you always go, what would Princess Anne do? That's my litmus test.
It is the litmus test. And she's brilliant. And she's been a great ambassador for things like the Olympics and so on and so forth. And around the world, she calls it as it is. You have the honour of meeting her and that sort of stuff.
Spare.
Brilliant.
And she was a spare, but she didn't feel the need to whinge about it and write a book.
Yeah.
No.
I'd love to know what she thinks about this. I think we can probably guess what she thinks about Princess
Coming up after the break. It's going to be good.
Well, if you're watching, do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, Biden in Ukraine. This is a story that's just broken this morning. A televised joint statement flanked by Biden. Zelensky has said that the democratic world has to win this historic fight. Are you being swept along with this tide of kind of enthusiasm?
Well, it's a very big brush that they're using, I can tell you that. I mean, I felt very uncomfortable a couple of weeks ago when I watched all of our elected MPs fawn over themselves to actually look at Zelensky and shake his hands like he was the second coming of Jesus. It was absolutely ridiculous. We cancelled Prime Minister's question times to just accept sycophantic questions when, again, we have people in this country who can't afford to heat their homes. And now we've got Biden in Ukraine, the most important visit ever. Look, I think we need some balance in this. I think we need to actually turn the spotlight back home and say, look, this is terrible. Nobody in Ukraine should be suffering because Putin wants to take them over. But at the same time, we have an awful lot of suffering here. And I want some of that spotlight that seems to be eternally on Ukraine turned home.
Yeah.
I think there are two things to this. And again, providing balance. War is...
You're suggesting we're not balanced.
No, I'm suggesting we are balanced. And that's the whole point. And the great thing about this show, and we look at all points of view. And I can guarantee that both Ukrainians and Russians don't want this war, is the reality.
Of course.
And I think also know the greatest thing, and Biden missed a trick, Joe Biden is an anagram of be joined. And you look at that sort of thing, of course it's a photo opportunity after photo opportunity and after photo opportunity. We need to stop the war because it's not benefiting anybody, and the more we plough money into it and the longer it carries on, it's awful.
So would you be in support of us giving jets, giving more firepower to
I
Ukrainians
would
now
try
in
and
order to bring
work
it to a
out
quicker
what's going to bring... Well, I think it's going to drag on forever. And the more that you keep throwing at it on both sides...
But we are in a ridiculous situation now where we are being accused by France and Germany of not having a military power strong enough that we could head NATO as we give away everything we have and money on top. You know, this is just a ridiculous situation. And actually, I would have thought it was such a massive security risk for the leader of the free world, as he is known, to pitch up in Kyiv today. You know, why did he need to do it?
Very good question.
What's a PR thing? I mean, you know why he needs to do it, because every other world leader is going along
to do it.
Well, he's got good old Trump chomping at his heels, and you've got all those sort of things. You want to, and this is the problem that I've got. It's using a terrible situation, maybe for PR purposes, or people could question that. What is the narrative? You want to be the biggest superstar in the world at the moment, apart from Harry. You turn around and say, look, you want to have your things. He's always going to wear his battle fatigues. He's not going to dress up in a suit. But that's what you're going to try and do. And that's what I find objectionable in a way, is that war is horrible. It's horrible for both sides.
It's horrible for the civilians.
For the civilians. And I say civilians on both sides. My heart goes out for both sides.
Very profitable, don't forget, the military-industrial complex.
And people should look at that as well. Question everything is important.
Right, thank you both very much. Now, still to come, UK retailers have slashed nearly 15,000 jobs since the start of the year, with experts warning that more could come. What's the government doing to help? I'll tell you after your morning's news.
Good morning, it's 11:32. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. President Biden has made a surprise visit to Kyiv ahead of the first anniversary of Russia's invasion. Meeting with President Zelensky, he said the United States would stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. He's expected to announce the delivery of further military equipment, including ammunition and radar systems. Mr. Zelensky said the visit was an extremely important sign of support for all Ukrainians. It comes just days before the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion.
Putin thought Ukraine was weak and the West was divided. As you know, Mr. President, I said to you in the beginning, he's counting on us not sticking together. He was counting on the inability to keep NATO united. He was counting on us not to be able to bring in others on the side of Ukraine. He thought he could outlast us. I don't think he's thinking that right now. God knows what he's thinking, but I don't think he's thinking that.
The partner of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has spoken of the family's agony after a body was found yesterday in the river near to where she went missing. Lancashire police are working to provide a formal identification of the body, which was found in the water around a mile from where Nicola was last seen. They're currently treating the death as unexplained. The 45-year-old disappeared more than 3 weeks ago whilst walking her dog. Peter Folding, who led a private search of the river for Nicola, says he still doesn't believe she drowned. More than 11,000 healthcare workers from the GMB and Unite unions in England and Wales are walking out today in their continuing dispute over pay and staffing. The workers striking include ambulance workers, paramedics and call handlers. GMB says it's over a month since the government engaged in meaningful dialogue. Elsewhere, the result of a ballot of around 45,000 junior doctors is expected to be announced later today by the British Medical Association. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
$15,000 retail jobs have been cut since the start of the year. It's a complicated issue about online shopping and all those tills with no human beings on them, frankly. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Bev Turner Today. So, figures from the Centre for Retail Research show that UK retailers have slashed nearly 15,000 jobs since the start of this year due to collapses and restructurings on the high street. Experts warn that the brutal start of the year could rise as a living squeeze has lowered customer spending power. Well, to tell me more is GB News' West Midlands reporter Jack Carson. Good morning, Jack. Anybody that went into a shop over the weekend, we can see this change happening before our very eyes. Even the supermarket that I went into had one till with a human being on it, and the rest of them, I was doing the job myself. That's what's happening, isn't it?
Well, Bev, this report out today from the Centre for Retail Research outlines that just since the start of the year, we're only still in February, but there's 15,000 either job cuts or announced losses coming this year. And the fact is, the report also says that there's unlikely to be any respite from this as well. When we break it down, around 3,000 of those job losses are coming from companies and businesses going to in administration or insolvency. We know on the high street we're losing the likes of Paperchase, M&Co as well. But the majority of these losses, around 11,500 of them, coming from companies, big companies with 10 or more stores across the country. Your supermarkets are shutting down stores and trying to cut costs because they've got to keep, of course, within consumer budgets, their own higher energy costs and, of course, their own taxes as well. One of those, of course, business rates. We know they're going to be reset on the 1st of April in a national revaluation, with the Treasury saying that around businesses are going to save around 20% on their bills. And they're also going to receive around a 75% discount on those rates, up to a cap of around £110,000. So that might be very beneficial for smaller, more independent businesses, but for the bigger businesses like Asda, like Wilko, your high street stores where they've got multiple stores across the country, the fact is that cap means they're not going to necessarily benefit so much, and they're still going to have to start cut costs. In what companies are doing is a rationalisation essentially. We know on the high street is changing. New Look have already closed 5 stores. Iceland have announced they're going to close 5 stores over the next few months. Marks and Spencer's, one of the stores you can see behind me, as a company, they say they're going to close around half a dozen stores this year, and possibly, we don't know, more to come depending on this situation. But we know how much the pandemic also affected the high street. 26.5% of our shopping is now done online, and so that's always going to mean that the high street is going to change and businesses have to adapt. Where those adaptations go, well, we know a lot of people are starting to socialise more, use the high street for bars, for restaurants, rather than just necessarily shopping. And so there'll be a lot of people that work in retail that are concerned by these figures about how safe and secure their job is, but it just means the high street seems to be changing rather than necessarily dying.
Thank you, Jack. Jack Carson there in the Midlands. So joining me for more analysis with this is retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning, Jeremy. Hi. Good morning. This change seems to have happened incredibly quickly, that we've got much more automation, people buying online and not able to go into a store. Is this a positive change, do you think?
In the end, it's positive, yes. Retail has changed, sweeping over it. The previous change before COVID was sort of luxury, indulgence, lots of branches, spend. And then COVID came along, and now this recession comes along, and that's everything wants to cut back, simplify, cut back to the minimum you can do. That's going to come to an end, and a whole new era will start again. And this is the way retail develops. It's a kind of a kind of tough way of being. If you work in retail, you've always got to be looking for the next thing. And so we talk about online, artificial intelligence. Retail has always been big at that sort of thing. Stock control has always been very computerized. They sort of Tesco invented watching the consumer, the Tesco card, very, very computerized. Tesco could tell you when you got pregnant before you knew yourself because of your change in behavior you're buying. So at the moment, we're coming to the end of a terrible era, cut back, simplify, boring, minimal, and then a new era will start again. I don't see why it shouldn't start in the summer. Coronation coming up, something, think of the last coronation, everyone had to via TV.
Here's the thing,
whole country-
Jeremy. Let me just, sorry to interrupt you, but I have some questions.
Yes.
This might be very good for the people that own these companies, that they no longer have such a large wage bill. I'm concerned that it is not good for the customer. So anyone who went shopping this weekend, I was one of them, and stood at those awful self-checkout tills, which never work, and there's one poor woman normally running around trying to put her pass in all of the tills because none of them work, and everyone stood there with their hands on their hips. Where are people going to get their jobs from? I don't want to buy everything online. So as a customer, I'm dissatisfied. And as an employee, there will be no jobs for these people.
There's about 3 million jobs in retail at the moment, some number like that. And so it's bad news, paper chase and things cutting back, going bust. That is very sad. But if you work in retail, you've got to be very agile. You've got to switch to artificial intelligence. If you're working in retail, have you taken your artificial intelligence course? Now's the time to do it, because everything will be affected. And emotionally, retail is very reaching out to people. So I think in the summer, we'll have a kind of the end of the cutback era and some sort of happy new development. And we're not sure what it is yet. But that's the way retail goes. It's constantly changing, and a new force, minimal clutter, declutter, get rid of things. That's the present time we're in. A new thing will come along. We're not sure what it is, but come back in 3 months' time, and something new will emerge, and that'll be exciting, and everyone will start spending again.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy Baker there, retail expert. I would love Andrew Eborn to share Jeremy's enthusiasm and his positivity. He said in the summer, what's going to happen between now and the summer to make my shopping experience better and to give some jobs back to those 15,000 people who've lost them?
Well, and there's two things here, and we always have this conversation because it's the I told you so moment, and every job that can be automated will be automated. We said this years ago.
Even if the customer is dissatisfied?
Well, I think, and this is where it goes, in terms of customer service, when you're phoning up people, and it's what they call the imitation game. And that's that wonderful test which Turing did to turn around and say, you can fool somebody into believing they're talking to a real person when they're talking to a machine. That's the imitation game.
Yes.
And what's going to happen is, you're right, you need to have the great experience. If it's a worse experience, that's not a positive thing. That's a negative, and your feedback is very helpful on that. I've always said that information is power. What I've said for many years, as you know, is I've predicted this moment. It's the moment when AI, artificial intelligence, will replace lots of jobs. It's when robotics will be replacing...
But why are you so happy about that, Andrew?
Well, firstly, and it sounds arrogant to say I predicted it, is that it's evolution. And what happens with any technological evolution, that's what's going to happen. It does mean, you're right, you then need to look at new jobs, the way that the workforce is going to be shifted.
You keep telling me we need to look at new jobs. Jeremy there's just said we've got to have a big change by the summer. What are these new jobs? Is everyone going to be a swimming pool lifeguard? I'm trying to work out what the summer jobs are going to be.
That's the problem. So what's going to happen is you need to educate people into a different sort of mindset. So if you understand...
A lazy mindset?
Well, no, I don't know if it's a lazy mindset. You can work in terms of... there will be more leisure time, is what I've said beforehand. But I know, but the difficulty is... But every revolution you have from a technology point of view, and I'm not being the harbinger of doom, I'm trying to say... Well, I'm trying to say...
You're the most smiley harbinger of doom I've ever seen.
Do you know, I think that the last sentence of that clip summed it all up, that retail evolves and things have to go. Those things are human beings.
Yes.
And there are two sides to this. Not only do we know, and I'm speaking as a doctor now, that working is good for people's mental health. We also know that for some people, you know that 1 in 7 over 50s do not speak to another human being in 7 days. And sometimes that only human being they speak to is at the supermarket checkout, or if they stand next to me in a line because I'll talk to them. This is all heading towards universal basic income, where people sit on their backsides getting fatter and unhealthier, and their mental health decreases. I think it's appalling. And I don't think many of those people are able or want to be retrained to be coders or designers, which are also very isolated jobs.
Sure.
We are losing our human touch in everything we do.
And I said beforehand, it is our greatest opportunity, but it's also our existential threat.
Are you OK? I mean, universal basic income is being trialled in Wales at the moment as a solution to this problem. It's a neo-communist future. Are you happy with that?
I'm not at all happy about that sort of side. I think there's a difference between what I'm, as a futurist, back to the futurist, is what we're saying is that this is what's going to happen. So you had to be forewarned. What you've touched on is absolutely right. We don't disagree on that at all. People need jobs. It's tragic that these jobs are being lost, but people should be prepared. It's going to happen. And people make jokes about paper chase folding. I mean, you work on that sort of basis. There are human lives behind this. What you need to do, and we need to work, as Raynaud rightly said, we need to have a purpose in life. Without
in an office, talking to people.
But otherwise, it affects our mental health, it affects our physical health, and so on and so forth. What I can do is to tell you what's going to happen, so we can forewarn people on that sort of basis.
But it feels like there's loads of people telling us these changes are happening. You don't need to tell me. I can see it at the weekend. I can see it in every shop I went to at the weekend. I was seeking out the tills with the human being on it and having a conversation behind the ridiculous Perspex screens, which are still there. And I was talking to every single one of these poor people. They probably thought, I just wanted to come here and do my job. I keep getting... this woman won't stop nagging me. But I was saying to them, are you happy with the fact that you're the only person on a till and you've got 9 tills behind you with 9 frustrated customers on them? And they all just said, no, but we don't have a choice.
And I think that's muddying the water about advances in technology, because that's not, for me, that's not an advance. What that is removing the human element. You need to have, where you can have interaction, which is the real shame when you close down things like post office and banks and so on and so forth. People need people. When I talk about AI, it's to make efficiencies. It's to make people's lives better.
Because make no mistake, these changes are to benefit the profits of the companies that are making them. They have less people to worry about, less people to employ, less national insurance and tax to pay on those people, so our revenues go down. Make no mistake. And I actually tweeted last night, didn't know we were doing this story today, Bev. I tweeted about an ad I got on my Twitter feed from a big bank that said, speak to our friendly chatbot.
Yes.
Well, A, when has a chatbot ever done what you want it to do?
Never.
And B, how is a chatbot friendly?
And also... but it will be. But that's the difference. And I say we're mixing two different things. Is one, it will be more efficient. We should never be a slave to technology. Technology should be there to empower us. To the extent it takes away that human interaction.
Why, when I'm at the supermarket, then, Andrew, and I am checking out my own shopping, I felt this week, I was like, hang on a minute, I'm doing someone's job here. I'm not getting... My shopping isn't any cheaper. I'm not getting paid to do someone's job. So someone's taking the mickey at the top of this business out of me.
But that's just a small element. I mean, self-checkout has been around for a long time. That's not really a shining example.
It is a shining example, not the whole bank of tills in a supermarket.
Because people, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. I do agree with you. I think people need human interaction for the reasons I've mentioned. When I'm talking about AI, it's about efficiency, it's about technology being empowering us to do other things. It's not about the negative side. Where we need human interaction,
I don't ever feel empowered by AI. I can't think of a single evidence or example.
If it makes something more efficient,
where the AI makes something
more
empowered.
efficient, and I gave an example on a doctor's surgery and things like that. We talked about inefficiencies. Ren and I, we've occupied many studios around the world. What we often talk about, thank you. What we often talk about is not just about wages and so on and so forth. It's about inefficiency. And to the extent technology can improve efficiency, that's got to be good. So that's why I say that sort of side.
Allowing
what you're talking about is a positive
thing. Their appointment with a human being online, fine, as long as they can do that.
Yes.
My GP surgery, when I try and do that, says, sorry, that service is not available.
Then there's a problem in the effective side.
Who'd have thought Little Britain would be so... Computer says no, computer says no. That's what we're hitting all the time. The tech is just not working. There's a real opportunity, actually, for some business to seize on this, because I don't think I'm alone in feeling like this, to seize on this idea that there are customers who want human beings and they want choice, they want interaction. Actually make a virtue of it. Set up a chain of shops which say, we only have human beings working on our tills. We will only have someone in the end of the phone.
And we take cash.
When you ring up a human being and we take cash, that's a place I'm going to spend my money. Right. Talking of money, you've spotted a mistake in the Times.
It's a headline. I always talk... What I love is about media watching, and people will often just regurgitate headlines in the news.
Not here.
Not here. We question everything, and that's what I love about the show. It's on the front page of the Times, who I love. I love the Times. But it does say £14 house price rise. And what it goes on to say is the average cost of a home in Britain has risen by only £14 to £362,452, an increase of £3 3.9%.
Well, that's...
And I thought, well, hang about, is 14 quid 3.9%? So I did my maths, and I thought, hang on, that means that your house is 389 quid. I will buy everybody's house here today. That's my offer to you. Give me that money, I'll sort it out. They clarify later on page 18 that actually that was like the monthly increase. But the headline, this is the point about just reading headlines.
Yeah.
The headline is misleading.
And it's being picked up by all of the news
Everybody's
outlets.
regurgitating
What it shows, Bev, is, and we've seen this over the last 3 years, how all news media just grabs a headline which is not absolutely representing what the story is and runs with it. And then people read it, regurgitate it, believe it, and it's hard then to dissuade them.
Yeah. Just let me go to some of your views that you've been sending in this morning. Oh, do you know what really lit your fuse this morning? And ours, litter. Litter on the motorways and on the roads. Thank you. My inbox lit up with this one. Gary says, I'm so glad you've talked about the litter on the motorways. It isn't the fault of the litter pickers or the highway people. It's the disgusting humans that dump it out of the windows. It's our taxpayers' money who have to clear it up. That's not the way. And George says, we British are a scruffy race. During my years at sea in the Merchant Navy, the dirtiest, scruffiest ports I visited were here in the UK. Lots of you infuriated about that. What do we want to talk about now? Should we do a little bit on Roald Dahl before we go?
Oh, please.
Shall we?
Yes.
So, Roald Dahl, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, amazing, of course, probably the world's greatest children's fiction writer. But now Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is not appropriate. Why not, Renee?
Well, because Augustus Gloop is now enormous, not fat. But we know he is fat. Yeah. And the horse-faced woman isn't horse-faced, she just has a face. It's just the Oompa Loompas are now...
They're no longer green or orange or any colour at all, I think. And this is the problem. One of our biggest weapons in this world is language.
Yes.
And I think, and it's one of our greatest powers. The word is mightier than the sword, but boy, is that sword getting blunted by the current woke brigade. This is such a wrong thing. We need to embrace language. We need to turn around and celebrate that language. Taking little snippets out and rewording it is wrong.
I think this is an attack. This is an attack on language. Language always changes. We know that. It evolves. Dictionaries change the odd word. We laugh at new words in the dictionary because of common usage. This is not that. This is a concerted effort to attack our language. And it's all about dumbing down and making everybody the same. I've just read Alice, the BFG, and every time I say something like fizz-whizzer, It's a bottom burp. She looks up at me and laughs because she loves it. And the bit about Roald Dahl, whatever kind of man he was he was able to garner that imagination in children that we lose as we grow up, where they love those words, snozcumbers. You know, absolutely love it. And to take that away, we have new parents have no say over this. They go and buy a Roald Dahl book and it's already been edited. So I say this, buy second-hand books, go back to the old editions and read your children what they want to read. And again, take back parental responsibility for what your children can read.
But isn't it funny, because it is this theme again that we talk about all the time, about somebody else deciding what is best for us and deciding what is best for our children. And I think these books, particularly, you know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the humour is in these caricatures. That's what they are. They are characters and they are caricatures. The humour doesn't work. If Augustus Gloop gets stuck in that tube because he's a big bone,
he's enormous.
It's not quite so funny.
No.
Right, guys, thank you so much. I think we've come to the end of the show.
Love
Andrew Eborn, lovely to see you. Renee, thank you so much. Right, it has flown by. Thank you for all of your messages as well this morning. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Gusty winds across much of the north today. They'll be steadily easing through the day. Bit of rain across Scotland, but most places dry and, for most of us, pretty mild. We've got low to the north, a high to the south, and in between this weather front, that's where we're seeing the thickest cloud and a little bit of rain. But the isobars fairly tightly packed as well. It is quite gusty, particularly over northeast England and northern Scotland. Staying fairly damp through the central belts. Bit of drizzle over the Cumbrian Fells and over Snowdonia, but most places dry, and actually some decent spells of sunshine over parts of the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And it is mild, so temperatures into the teens, 14, 15 Celsius, where we see some sunshine. Cooler further north, but even here temperatures are a touch above average for the time of year, but feeling a bit colder with the winds.
Those winds will continue to ease through this evening. The rain should clear away from the central belt, but fairly damp nights across parts of western Scotland. Otherwise, again, most places dry. Could be some mist and fog. We'll generally just keep a lot of cloud. And look at these temperatures overnight, staying at 7 or 8 Celsius, so a very mild